how many of the edits to do here, so.
Like a little
Yeah,
Unabomber.
I think it's good, I think it's,
Also, someone's got me beat.
yeah.
Okay, it's 7:30, Marie wants to get going, so let's go. I'm gonna give you a lot of grief tonight.
Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone to our workshop. We'll get her started here. Financial report, which Michelle got together for us. She's been busy with an audit, and then has the financial report. So I kind of, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, gave her the night off. If we have questions that you need answered, we can get them to her. And if need be, I can have her at either our next meeting, or I think the following one, the auditors will be here, and so she's going to be there for that. So if you have any questions or whatever, you can just send them, and we'll work up it that way. And then we'll get her here, and then start a routine. I think it was the third week we were going to have her, or the fourth week? Fourth week? Yeah, okay. So next up, Mr. Roush and company. Are you ready?
Yes, we're
Or do you need more time to prepare?
We're ready.
Okay, go for it. I guess stand over there would be best, that we can get your,
It's gonna be all stream of consciousness anyway.
what's it, stream of consciousness?
All stream of consciousness.
Perfect, works for us.
It's not gonna work very well with the
No.
whole town, but.
Well, thanks for having us here and giving us the opportunity to present. My name is Michael Rauch. I'm the project director of a group called Renewable Highlands. I'm here with Jason Angel, and he's a member of the group as well, or participant in the group, I guess you would say. And I just wanted to sort of come and present the project that we've been working on over the last year or so, and give you an overview of, sort of introduce the project, introduce the concept, and outline some of the steps involved and sort of what we're working on and why. So to start, Renewable Highlands is a nonprofit group. It's grassroots. I mean, we were literally meeting in living rooms around town about a year ago and trying to think of ways to promote sort of local adoption of renewable energy. And we started doing some research and then came across sort of a new policy tool called Community Choice Aggregation. It's just a tough name, but we go by CCA. And we decided that was a really valuable tool to accomplish the goal we wanted to accomplish, and then bring in some additional benefits as well to local communities. So that's what we set out to do. The community choice aggregation sort of framework was attractive to us because it promotes the use of renewable energy, but also if implemented correctly, it can lead to a lot of follow-on projects and sort of work as a vehicle to promote things like local project development, local renewable energy project development, energy efficiency programs, and things like that that also help sort of reduce energy consumption and green the sourcing of the supply. So that's sort of why we decided to pursue it. I think it'd be worthwhile to sort of back up and sort of go into a little bit of the nitty-gritty, not too long, about what CCA is and how it works. So it's really a method. Well, back up one step further. If you think of your Central Hudson electricity bill, there's two main components. One is supply, the other is delivery. And New York is a deregulated market, so what that means is Central Hudson makes their money, earns their return on the delivery of power, not the supply of power. Anyone can go out and choose who they want their supplier to be. Turns out only about a quarter of New Yorkers have done that, and who knows what the reasons are, but one of them is likely that it's just complicated and it's tough to make a choice as an individual. You have that choice, you're free to do it, nothing stopping you. Central Hudson even facilitates it by linking to different suppliers on their website. But a lot of people just don't do it. So right now, Central Hudson is, in our area, sort of the state-mandated default supplier. So if you don't make that choice, they have to provide you with energy supply. So what CCA does, sort of in a nutshell, is empowers local communities, local elected officials to step into the energy supply market and sort of select a different default supplier based on criteria that they set. So those criteria could be anything from a savings rate to a sourcing option. You know, if you wanted 100% renewable energy, for instance, that could be one criteria that you set as the village. The CCA process is such that once that control is shifted from the state level to the local level, you know, the village would be negotiating for that default supply on behalf of local residents and small businesses. So it gives the village bargaining power with energy supply companies, and that's where most of the savings really derive from. So because I, as an individual choosing a supplier, don't have any market clout or bargaining power, you know, if the village were to participate in the CCA, they would be going out to the supply market on behalf of all of us, all of the residents. And so that gives you essentially market power to define your own criteria and set your own parameters under which you'll choose a supply contract. It so happens that in our area, most municipalities are pretty small. So we've spent the last few months trying to work with a number of municipalities in the area to sort of organize a structure in which they can all go out to the supply market together and then benefit from a broader aggregation. And so right now we have a population base roughly of about 20,000 accounts, and that's an estimate. You know, if you use sort of like 3 people per account, it's roughly 60,000 people. That's sort of communities representing that population base have signaled interest in this project. I'm not saying it's like baked and ready to go. So we're here tonight trying to sort of introduce you to the topic, tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and answer any questions about how it works and sort of why we're doing it.
Matt, I think the only thing I'll throw in, just because I've been working with Mike on this for about a year. I think it's a new tool. New York State just approved CCAs in April, and the main point of it is that municipalities that join, so Phillipstown, Beacon, Town of Fishkill, Wappingers Falls, hopefully Cold Spring, take all of the households and small businesses in their municipality and they put them into basically a bulk purchasing deal, where we're using scale by combining all of the homes and small businesses in these areas to go out to the electricity market and say, we want a better deal. What's the best you've got? And so the only way it kicks in is if the electricity supply deal is cheaper than it was last year. So that's one thing. I mean, the second thing to remember is that municipalities pay nothing in this. So the way the CCA works is there's no money the municipality puts down. They form an intermunicipal group. They put out a bid together for all of the homes and small businesses. So it's not a municipal electricity deal. It's for all the homes and small businesses in Cold Spring. If a bid comes back that meets the criteria the municipality set, it has to be cheaper. All right, but then there's a conversation about how much more renewable we want. At that point, you can get that new supplier. So the only thing houses and small businesses see of a change is the portion of their Central Hudson contract that says supply comes from. And they're going to see if a bid comes back that meets it, a lower electricity supply rate, and hopefully more renewable, which is why we've been working on it. So that's just one, I mean, and one other thing I think Mike mentioned, but that's important to know, the way it works is all of the homes and small businesses, except the homes and small businesses that have an ESCO or a deal, have already chosen a different supplier than Central Hudson, they all get automatically opted into this program. All right, so you're using this bulk purchasing power to get, households and small businesses a better deal. They get opted into that program, and they can opt out at any time for no cost. But that is kind of the new part of this tool, which is kind of using combined strength in numbers to get the sort of discounts that big institutions get, big box stores get, but trying to bring those discounts back home to individual homeowners and small businesses. And see, Glenn is here, who is part of the Jewel Assets team that just did the first pilot CCA in Westchester County. So there's been one CCA in New York State since it was approved, and they signed So 20 municipalities joined together in that first CCA. They got $4 to $5 million in savings. That number may be changing, so Glenn can talk to that. 14 out of those 20 municipalities not only got cheaper electricity supplies, they got 100% renewable option. So they moved all of the households and small businesses into 100% renewable. Thousands and thousands. So it's just, you know, the reason we're excited about this is because, you know, at the local level, you know, where, as you all know, you know, this is one of the most impactful things you can do to move households and small businesses en masse into more renewable while saving them money. You know, the saving money is key. It doesn't go forward unless it does. But so it's a new tool, and so it's very exciting. And the last thing I'll mention is that, you know, we all, you know, people who are, you know, we think of this as low hanging fruit because, you know, small businesses save money on it. You know, I think Glenn will talk about it, but one utility area in Westchester is saving about 17% for small businesses on their electricity bill. It's a big gain for small businesses. But at the same time, that whole moving the renewable forward. So it, you know,
I'd
will
also-
stop. Yeah.
I'd also just, we won't, you know, sort of keep going too long before we start answering some questions if there are any, but one of the things that I sort of think is most important about this as I've learned about it is the way I look at it is kind of like a price cap on energy supply prices is really what it effectively becomes, because if the village were to choose to participate and village residents were to be enrolled in the program, you know, the supply contract that was selected would be for a term longer than what's possible now in the regular energy supply market, so say 2 to 3 years. So you know your supply price for that set period of time. And if for some unforeseen reason supply prices in the market plummet after you've entered that contract, you can always exit and sort of move into that, you know, the current rate. So it's really capping the supply prices. You'll always know the most you're going to pay on supply by participating. And then if the market does something irregular and just nosedive for some reason, you can go capture those savings as well. So that's sort of how I think about how it is as a long-term sort of supply price certainty tool.
Are we bringing the man in the hallway in? The mystery man?
I like to remain mysterious. Hi, sorry, I didn't want to cut in. Yeah, so my name is Glenn Weinberg. I'm from a company called Jewel Assets, and the first, as Jason mentioned, the first New York State CCA program just went live in May, and that's in Westchester County, and it's being administered by a local nonprofit called Sustainable Westchester, which is a kind of an interesting nonprofit. The board, it's a membership nonprofit, but the members are the municipalities of the county. So it's kind of an intermunicipal nonprofit by nature. So since that program went live about 6 months ago, the savings, the customers in aggregate have saved over $1 million. We continuously beat utilities each month consistently now. That's not a guarantee, of course. There's no guaranteed savings. We have a fixed rate, or we're going to pay. We know that we have cost certainty for the next 3 years, but we can't guarantee what the fluctuating market is going to do. But so far, we've been beating both the Con Ed and the NICEAG rate consistently each month, and so those savings continue to grow. And 2/3 of our roughly 90,000 customers in Westchester are enrolled in a 100% renewable product, meaning that all that power is backed by Greenie certified renewable energy credits, and maybe I can kind of say what that means if there's questions about that. But it means that all of that energy demand, all of those 60 some odd thousand customers that are in that renewable option are signaling to the market that they only want renewable power. And what that does is it drives both local and national development of new renewables, and also sends price pressure against fossil fuel generated power. So it's a strong signal in the marketplace, but it's only the beginning, because the second stage of a program like this is to really drive local development of solar and other renewables like wind and hydro.
So some questions. What kind of, if the village were to sign up for this, what kind of PR do you assist the village in doing to sell the benefits to the municipality, the people within the municipality? Do you have press kit? Do you assist the village office with making people aware? What do
Yeah,
you
so
do?
I think the best way to answer that is to speak towards, to some degree, the implementation process, because that will identify who's involved in what aspects and who's helping where. So, you know, the first step that, let me back up and say the whole process is regulated through the Public Service Commission. It outlines steps that villages need to take, or municipalities need to take to participate in a CCA. So the first of those steps would likely be to pass a local law which enables but doesn't commit the village to participate in a CCA. And so that would come with all the requisite, you know, hearing requirements and things like that. You would also need to select an administrator model. So who's going to be running the program over the term of the contract? Who's going to be helping with the energy supply requests for proposals? Who's going to be making sort of those technical determinations, you know, in conjunction with the village? And we as Renewable Highlands, this outside nonprofit group, have done our homework on that, and we're recommending that municipalities that are interested in participating in a CCA use Glenn's group, Jewel Assets, because of their experience locally. Also, you know, a whole host of reasons which we can provide to you. So once those decisions start getting made, then Jewel, as the administrator of the program, is the one, in conjunction with our group, Renewable Highlands, that would be helping with outreach, education, and doing all of the tasks that are required by the Public Service Commission.
What's the typical amount of time from when you plant the seed in our minds and it happens?
It's about a 6-month process. There's some flexibility sort of to go faster and also and sometimes it takes longer. But it's about 6 months to really, and there's some built-in timelines within that 6 month that, as Michael is referring to, as the Public Service Commission has laid out. For instance, there's a 2-month minimum outreach period. So the critical piece that you're referring to is, how do we communicate this to our residents? What's going on? What does this mean for them? What is this going to look like on their bill? All that kind of stuff. So the Public Service Commission recognizes that, and they've said you can take no fewer than 60 days to do that, because we want to make sure that you are taking your time to do that and not just rushing to get a supply contract without taking the necessary steps to actually let people know. So you run articles in the local press, of course. You can post material, educational material on your municipal website. You can send out e-blasts, depending on how strong your email lists are, and those sorts of things. Michael and Jason and I would make ourselves available for public meetings, not just regular board meetings or work sessions, but also for local groups, civic associations, housing associations, consumer groups, senior centers, those sorts of things. In addition, there are also sort of standardized messages that you can send. For instance, if you have kind of robocalling or some sort of automated functionality like that, you can write those up. You can send out kind of sort of standardized letters or communications through various other media. So there are ways that you can continue to make this known, but the real fail-safe in that department is that if you go forward with this and you get a contract with a supplier, every single eligible customer in the village will get a letter in the mail. And that letter will tell them what's going on, what the new price is, what they used to be paying, who the new supplier is, and how they can opt out or leave the program if they want to. And we make it really easy for them to leave if they don't want to join, right? So that's the really important mandatory piece of communication that you must do to your residents.
Glenn, can I just add
Yeah.
to that? Just to make it clear, it is the role of the CCA administrator, so that would be the supplier that wins the contract, and this is the case in Westchester, that is responsible for sending that communication to village residents and small businesses. And when you have a, call with more questions number, those calls are going to the administrator that is the person who is running the program. So
What's the typical overhead to the municipality to do this? I see maintaining lists of our current electric users, which we don't have, so that has to be generated, and then you have to determine who's gonna stay, who's gonna go. So it takes time and herbs of energy it seems to me, for the municipality to administer this.
If the municipality were to administer it themselves,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
yeah.
in place of yourself, but rather,
Oh, in addition to.
yeah.
Yeah, the municipality doesn't have to, the way that it works is the municipality doesn't really have to hold or maintain any of those lists or anything like that. They come directly to the administrator. Typically what you have is
From the
As we-
utility.
from the utility, you make a request to the utility for that sort of data, and they can send it to the administrator. So for instance, in Westchester, we had 20 municipalities. They weren't each doing those sorts of requests. We were doing all those requests centrally for them, and it would work the same way here.
Now, the 17% that you quoted, that's Con Ed, right? Westchester saved, I think you said, in general, 17%. It's my understanding that Central Hudson's rates are different than Con Ed. So, I mean, set expectations, we shouldn't be thinking in the range of a 17% reduction in
No.
individual utility bills. What is reasonable for a Central Hudson bill today versus going with a CCA? What would be a reasonable savings to expect?
You're exactly right. I mean, the 17% figure is sort of the best savings rate that was in
Well, you're
Westchester.
talking New York
obviously,
City
right?
rates, right?
So, in Central Hudson, Glenn has a request out right now to suppliers to get indicative pricing based on an estimated load, essentially. So, an estimated group of demand. And so we expect that back, any day now. But I think, if you're looking broadly, I think, something in the neighborhood of 5 to 10% on a residential retail electric bill would
Okay.
be,
Not
I don't wanna say
unreasonable.
expected,
No,
but not
not
unexpected.
unreasonable.
That's what the data suggests from the Northeast states in the past. So in New York, we only have one case study sort of to look at it, and as you say, most of it was in Con Ed territory, so it's gonna be a different rate structure. But when you look at Massachusetts, New Jersey, and even to Ohio, you're looking around 5 to 10% typically off the supply portion of the bill.
Yeah. As it turns out, I happen to purchase my electricity from a different supplier. If I were to decide to stay out, I would want to know how my supplier, who's in Texas, as it turns out, stacks up against what the CCA might be able to provide. So in the analysis that I, as an individual, will have to do, will I have the tools at my disposal to make that decision?
So I think the first part to answer your question is, the key to remember here is we're talking about the default supply. So, the village would be empowering itself to make that decision on behalf of the customers that are remaining with the default supply era.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
that group would be automatically enrolled in this program.
Right.
That's what we're talking about here. Your group, someone like in your case, you could choose to join the group, right? So
But I need the tools
yeah,
to make that
whether
decision.
you have the tools, it's kind of an interesting question.
Well, so what we could do, developing now, for as much as what we intend to do, have moving forward, is a website that shows that price to compare and has a tool that's updating, right, as quickly as we can update it. So there's a significant lag now that we have in rates, but we're looking to shorten that lag. But so that, you won't get a letter in the mail, the letter that I talked to, you know, it'll only go to the eligible, the default customers, as Michael is saying. But what will inevitably happen is those of you with another supplier, you know, your neighbor or somebody, right, somebody at work will say, oh, I got this thing in the mail and it looks like we're gonna be saving some money and that kind of thing, and then you're interested, right? So the important thing is to have that URL and have something up there so that any consumer, whatever situation they're in, can go in and say, and it won't necessarily have your price, of course, but you'll be able to go back to your bill and compare to what the utility is offering and what the CCA is offering.
Well, I have some questions. From what I understand, if we opt to do this, we're speaking for every resident in the village. So everyone is basically opted in unless they decide to opt out. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you said early on that, I guess it's across the country, this has always been an option, and maybe 30% of Americans have decided to, or 30% have decided not to go with a different user. All right, go ahead. I'm
So
saying something
the-
wrong.
Right,
They're unaware.
the quote on the quarter was state-based, so that was a reference to, in the competitive supply market, in the deregulated market, you know, about a quarter of New Yorkers have selected a different supplier. That doesn't speak to CCA selection.
Right, and I
Right.
understand that. What I'm getting at is basically, we're now going to say to everyone in Cold Spring, hey, you know, we're gonna offer you renewable energy, a better price and so on and so forth, and if you want out of it, you have to do X, Y, Z. You know, we're looking at a village of roughly 2,000 people, and a very broad spectrum of retirees in their, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who don't really care about going to see a URL and don't wanna pick up a phone and say, I wanna opt out. They, you know, somebody told them a while ago that this might be an option, and they said they don't wanna be bothered. And so that's where they're at. And then there's a whole bunch of people in this village who are very interested in this. And so my concern is I don't like talking for everyone, especially those who may have decided a long time ago they don't wanna be bothered with this. And then, a couple of other questions. You said that, you know, we're gonna lock in a rate for maybe 3 years, but if there's a rate that goes down, we can choose to. So who's going to tell us if the rate goes down, or is that our responsibility to log in every once in a while and see if another company comes in with a lower rate? Are you guys going to notify us that, hey, you know, company Y has a better rate than the one we're offering you or the one we've locked you into? Or is that our responsibility to go running around and checking utility rates?
It's an interesting question. I mean, it would, for the administrator, potentially Jewel, to do that, would be a significant undertaking and would add to their cost of administration, to constantly be refreshing, you know, rate data.
So
It
individually.
would also, you wouldn't wanna make a recommendation based on spot prices moving up and down when you're comparing to a long-term rate,
Right.
right? So, I don't know, I mean, perhaps in your administrator contract with someone like Jewel, you could say if, you know, market prices stay below the average rate for, I don't know, X billing cycles, this is just an idea right now, then you will notify us and notify our
Yeah.
participants. That could be one way to handle it, but
It'll be
the
interesting
key is
to
to
see
compare sort of like long-term averages, and that's
Right,
that's how the decisions are made.
Fine for people who, you know, are computer literate, on the computer a lot and don't mind doing that. You know, and that's not all of our population, and so
No, I
that's my,
understand that.
that's my concern. And my last question, and I know you had something to say, what is a typical cost for Jewel to administer this for us?
So I can speak to that if that's okay. I
Yeah,
mean, the way that the administrator structure tends to work is, there's a fee that's taken out of like the savings. So it's, I forget how to say this, it's typically 1/100th of a penny,
1/10 of a penny.
1/10 of a penny, per kilowatt hour sold through the CCA goes to the administrator to run the program. In Jewel's case, and that sort of the homework we did researching different administrator models, their rate was 20% less than that.
So that comes from each individual building, is that how, or does it come from the village as a participant?
It comes off of, the supplier actually pays that rate to Juul, so it's not a customer issue, it's not a village issue. Whoever the selected supplier is, you know, forwards that rate to the administrator, whether it's Juul or anyone else.
The supplier pays it, and it's actually, and they know that up front. So when they respond to the bid, right, they have an obligation to submit a bid that's less than X. Say you set a benchmark, right? So that you make sure that you're paying less than what you've been paying for the last year or 3 years, whatever, however you define it. When they're preparing their bids, they know that they're going to have to send, in our case, 8/100ths of a penny per kilowatt hour out to us as the administrator. So they factor that into their price, but they're also competing against other suppliers, so they want to make sure that they can win the bid. So all of that is going into their calculus and is their risk. The customer doesn't see it, they see one rate. So when the supplier submits that bid, it's what's called an all-in rate, meaning that's inclusive of all their costs, so grid-related costs as well as administrative-related costs on their end and on our end. So they have to ramp up customer service, for instance. They know that, they know how much roughly that's going to cost them. That's also baked into their bid, but they have to stay, if you've set a firm benchmark, they have to stay under that with all of that in the mix. And if I could, just for a second, I want to step back to the issue that you raised earlier. So one thing is that only a quarter have chosen to participate in the competitive market. There are various reasons for that. A major reason, though, is that the deregulated competitive supply market is notorious for these predatory business practices. What they call slamming, which is sort of deceiving people into moving, and teaser rates and all these other kinds of putting these really onerous termination fees in their contracts, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, the Public Service Commission cracked down on them in February of this year, and they issued this new rulemaking where they said you have to do business totally differently. And they're fighting it, and they're back and forth, and it was vacated, and now it's in court, it's going back and forth. But the market is, as regulators have been fighting for years and are trying to now act on, the market for consumers is really sort of broken. So CCA is a sort of consumer protective layer. In other words, we here write the contract, right? And when we put out that bid, we put it out with a contract attached to it. And we say to the suppliers, here's our contract, take it or leave it, more or less. It's a little bit of a collaborative process leading up to that, but the consumers, the municipalities and the local attorneys, they write the contract. So it's a solution in many ways. In addition to the savings benefit and the renewable energy benefit, it's a consumer protective tool that the state has pushed to the head of the line in a lot of these kind of new policies for that reason, amongst others, but as a way to address the sort of issues that have been plaguing the competitive market thus far. Yeah.
I just wanted to, just before we forget, and I don't know, we don't want to take up too much time, but where we are in the process. So this is part of the kind of public education process. Mike and I have been working on this for a year. We are, I live in Garrison, Long Haul Farm, we're local residents. All right, it's a nonprofit initiative, it's a community-driven initiative, but where we've been going, so there's Phillipstown has passed a non-binding resolution of support. That was after a public hearing and presentation. City of Beacon has passed a non-binding resolution of support after a public hearing. Town of Fishkill has, and the Village of Wappingers Falls have. So there's always, and the next steps after this, is, to pass a local law, with the municipality joining the CCA, but then there's a required public hearing process and outreach process before the municipality agrees to join. And so, we are trying as a grassroots group of citizens to do as much outreach as possible. So when we talked to Richard Shea, he said, I think it'd be important to reach out to parent groups and PTAs. So we're meeting with Garrison PTA in December. We're reaching out to Haldane PTA. Maybe we'll be able to do a school assembly so we can get the information out to homeowners. Seems like the right way to do it. And there's a lot of clear benefits, we think, You know, besides the fact municipalities don't have to put up costs, someone else is administering it. It only goes forward if people are saving money, and it can lead to a major increase in renewables. But there are downsides if you call them that. You know, I don't think they are, but to be upfront, you know, some of them have been raised. Let's say municipalities put out a bid together and no supply comes back that meets it. So there's just the fact that, you know, we didn't get it. Maybe 25,000 accounts isn't enough. Westchester was 90. But that's not much of a downside, given, you know, and then you could say, you know, there are people that will be like, this is a change, right? I see a change here. But you know, I think those downsides have to be weighed with the idea that it's a new tool, that what it's really doing, I tried to go into that ESCO market and figure it out. I wasn't getting great rates, but this is about putting 25,000 accounts together and getting that power of bargaining together that all the big hospitals, big box stores, big institutions get, but for individuals. And so is it worth it? I mean, if we're not going to make progress, one, it's about saving money, doesn't go forward, but also making progress on climate change at the local level. Talking about moving en masse households into more renewable energy while they're all saving money. So I guess the downside is having to do the education, explain why. It is a shift, but hopefully.
When you say it's not good, it has to save money or it doesn't go forward.
Yes.
Then kind of explain that a little more, because I think that's kind of to Fran's part.
So that's a good point. So the municipalities that choose to participate or show interest in participating would basically say, you know, our criteria for signing a contract with a supplier are these. One of them could be savings of 5%. And you would basically establish a baseline for the current default supply rate. So you might average over the last 12 months or 24 months, whatever it might be. And then you would compare the prices that the suppliers bid to your proposal to that baseline price. And so you would say, okay, this one's 5% below our baseline price. It checks off that criteria that we established. And then, you know, as we were talking about earlier, you might want to figure out some way to track the savings as the program goes. And that's why Len mentioned the rate to compare that they're working on now.
So if we have an administrator, then how does the administrator, when do you lock in or pull out, or it's like kind of like a stock market or something sounding, like when do you pull in or when do you, if you're an administrator, then are you looking at you know, what we can actually do or what our rates are down and when you would switch to someone else, or do you lock in with a certain company for X amount of years?
Well, yeah, I mean, on the last piece, we would really advocate trying to get as long-term a contract as you can, because not only because of that cost certainty extending as far out into the future, but it gives you a real window to then negotiate sort of local development against that supply contract that you already have. But the first part of your question, it's really sort of more of an art than a science, and what I mean by that is that this takes, as I said, it takes sort of 6 months, right? Maybe, you know, after month 3, you sort of know who you have and who the group is, and it may grow and it may shrink actually when you get to the end, but you have a good sense of sort of what it's going to look like. And when you pass those local laws, that gives you access to the utility data to let you know exactly what you have. So how much energy you're actually using, in which months, what your peaks are, and all that kind of stuff that suppliers need to know. And so you start to pass that sort of things on, some characteristics of that data to the suppliers and say, hey, if it's this size with these characteristics, do you think we can beat the 12-month benchmark? Do you think we can beat the 24-month benchmark? And they'll tell you, because it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of their time. They'll be very honest with you, and that's what we did throughout the process in Westchester. We're constantly checking in with the suppliers, right? When we would grow in size, we'd check back in. Or when something else would happen, when we get more data, we'd check back in. And they would tell us, and at some point, roughly 2 months before we went out to bid, maybe even less than that, 6 weeks, we got the go signal basically from the suppliers. This will work, we can hit this benchmark. We're giving them an indication of where that benchmark is likely to be based on our calculations, and they said, yes, we can do it. So you don't really, you're kind of always reevaluating, and when you get a sense, yes, this could work, then you sort of, you know, you push the throttle and you go forward.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question,
I have a
clarification?
question. Go ahead.
No, just to clarify, so once the group of Westchester municipalities put out their RFP, basically, once the bids came back and they chose the bid that met the criteria the best, how long did municipalities have to lock in with that bid?
That afternoon. The way that, and so that's one of the interesting thing, that you're dealing with the commodity market and behind all this. So when a supplier wins a bid, let's say the bids are due at 11 a.m., they essentially have to know by 3 p.m. that day whether or not they've won. And the reason for that is that they're going to go out before the market closes, and they're going to go out and buy that block of energy for the entire length of the contract, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. They're going to buy it, they're going to hedge it out from day one. And because they don't want to take the risk of prices either, right? So they hedge it out from the start, they buy that block out. So they need to know that that bid that you've put out is firm, that the municipalities that are standing behind that bid, that are representing that demand, are going to sign that contract that day by about 3 p.m. so that they can then go make that transaction on the market.
And that's why it's important to sort of enumerate what you want, have a
Right.
compliant
Well,
bid
that's my question.
leading up to that.
How do you have conformity among all these communities? Like, if one person has a low price, that's all they care about. The other person wants nothing but renewables, and they're all represented in the same, organization or whatever you want to call it. How do you make that work? If you're just bidding for, are you going to each town and trying to meet their criteria and then going out with it, or is the goal to have a bigger group of people that all want the same thing, and then it's easier to get it?
Sort of both. So you can't have a million choices, but you can certainly have 2 or 3. So for instance, you could have a municipality that says, so you can go out to bid and you can ask, and you can define exactly, as Michael is saying, you can define exactly what a compliant bid looks like. It's lower than the benchmark, it's this, it's that, right? And in those specifications, you can say, we want your lowest possible price, A. We want a price for 100% renewables, B, and maybe there's a C or even a D, right? I wouldn't extend too much past that. But if you have 2 or 3 choices, then the municipality can say, hey, listen, we're really interested in savings first. And we want our default product to be that lowest price. And then municipality B may say, listen, this is really a green initiative for us. And we want 100% renewable, and if our people want to switch down to ultimately the individual consumer will have all of those A, B, C, and D choices, but the municipality will select which one will be the default for the customers within their jurisdiction. Does that answer the question?
It does for towns, but how about, I thought the point was that, like Beacon and Phillipstown and Cold Spring, they represent a buying block or whatever. And that's why you have more power because you have, 8,000 people instead of just 2. So if you have, discontinuity between all these villages and what they want, doesn't that kind of mess your calculus up a little bit?
Yeah, so they have to, so in that example that I gave, it'd all be one bid, right, with several different options within that bid as a sort of a program structural component. If there are sort of irreparable differences or, between the municipalities, they would have to go out to separate bids. But as long as they can kind of compromise and find multiple options that they can all agree on and say, ultimately, we'll pass the decision on to our consumers, but we want to be able to offer X, Y, and Z together. And even though our interests aren't entirely aligned or our priorities aren't entirely aligned, we can kind of agree on a basic structure because we know ultimately we'll all get the best deal if we do this together.
Can I make just one point, that it's the municipalities that lead that effort of deciding what the criteria are. So if Cold Spring went ahead, a representative from Cold Spring would be in the dialogue with Beacon, with the town of Fishkill, because we've been kind of doing the work of trying to educate and organize, but once a municipality takes this on, it is a intermunicipal leadership effort. So there will be that conversation of saying, can we get on the same ground? Maybe not. And then Glenn says, but, to be honest, Mike and I have been going and because it's been, we have been pushing that we don't want this effort to just be about getting the lowest price, the fossil fuels. We've been pushing, we're doing this to increase renewables while getting cheaper electric, but at the end of the day, it's in the control of the municipalities.
And the final point I would add to the question you're asking, which is a good one, is, if, I'm just throwing out examples here, if Fishkill, I don't know, said that they wanted all green, and Cold Spring said, we want the cheapest. Well, the aggregation effect of both towns working together is still there, because you can still work within the same bid to get two sort of components out of that bid. So you could still choose the cheapest power, Fishkill could still choose the greenest power and still benefit from that aggregation and that bulk buying power.
I don't understand that. If Fishkill wants green and Cold Spring wants money, what does the power company come back and bid? Two different prices, green price and money price?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Can you get two different power companies to bid? Would there be an option of company A to give you green and company B to give you price?
You could split up the bid any way you want. You could split up the bid by municipality, of course. You could split up the bid by service class, so residential, small commercial, you can bid it. But every time you split it, you're sort of splitting the pricing benefit too. So if you have a really huge group, 100,000 accounts or something like that, well then you can split it once or even twice, and you can still get a pretty good pricing benefit. If you only have a group of, let's say, 20 or 25,000 to begin with, every time you split it, now you're sort of you're slicing into those potential savings. So it's a strategic question, really, in the end. But you certainly could.
I have a question. Is there a minimum number of municipalities that you need to sign on to this agreement to actually make it work?
So that's a good question. So we've been working for about, I don't know, the better part of a year on trying to do our homework on CCA and really figure it out and then bring it to various municipalities. It's not, sort of the pricing doesn't become beneficial by the number of municipalities. It's really a load, an electricity usage, so it tends to be through a number of accounts. The Westchester project was one of the biggest in the country, actually, and it has 100,000, 110,000.
Yeah, it's about 90. Yep,
90,000.
Yeah.
Based on sort of the municipalities we've been talking to that seem most interested, we're at about 20,000 accounts. But we're continuing to do outreach to other municipalities. But it's not, we think it's viable now. That's why we're going to speak with suppliers to get indicative pricing to ensure that it's viable at that size. So that's sort of where we are in the process, if that answers your question. I don't know that there's a set number that people have established.
I don't know, I think in terms of economies of scale,
Yeah.
that, when you get more in, more people to join in, then you get a better.
It plateaus. The answer, so for a while it's sort of a linear thing, right? The more you get in, the more that, and then it plateaus, and you get to a point where you're really not gonna, they're giving you your best price.
Okay.
And the number of accounts, they're gonna look at three things really. They're gonna look at the number of accounts, because that's the customers they have to serve and they have to be prepared to answer the phone and all that. They're gonna look at the amount of power, of course, that those accounts produce, and in this area, it's actually a fairly high per capita consumption. So it's actually, the number of accounts is a little bit deceptive in this case, because it's really more power than for instance, in Westchester. And third, they're going to look at something else called load factor, which has to do with how much you use at peak versus how much you use at the average. So there's a whole kind of calculation behind it, behind what the best price that you can get from them is. The good news is that this particular area, with all those things taken into account, is a really good combination of those three components, and you're likely to get a really good price even if you're sort of on the lower end of that threshold number.
Okay. My other question, I have two more questions. You mentioned that typically households see a 5 to 10% savings in their supply charges. Is that savings pretty much the same for small businesses as well, or do they see better or worse savings?
Be careful when you say small businesses, you mean retail.
No, I mean anybody who's running a business.
Well, we tend not to have any industry in the village of Cold Spring. We have residences and we have retail, the school, food town. Those are probably our two biggest employers. So we don't have a lot, no big box stores, no companies that draw a lot of power.
But doesn't the rate cover everyone regardless?
Well,
No?
you get different rates for different users.
The residential and small business, and there's a firm actual definition of that, so I'll talk to that in a second, are the only customers that are automatically enrolled. Everybody else, including the school, the municipality itself, or any other, could opt into the program, but it's those residential and small business. And those small business customers are defined as non-demand charge customers. And so, what it means is that your peak is less than 10 kilowatts. So for that, it means that the drugstore on Main Street, yes, the food town, no. That's kind of the way to think about it. Small, a small retail shop, likely under that threshold, the supermarket, the bank even above that.
It's an existing rate class that the utilities have established, and they bill through, I guess is the best way to say it. And so it's been the same.
Yeah, they can join it, they can opt in.
My last question was, what does this actually look like in the end to the consumer? Does the consumer wind up getting multiple electric bills, or is it just all in one bill?
It's all on the same Central Hudson bill.
Okay. Because just from my experience, when it was, when we could initially start buying our supply from other places, I wound up getting 3 electric bills a month, which wound up being really confusing, not here, but elsewhere.
Central Hudson's been doing it.
Same Central Hudson bill, except the name on the top part of the bill, the supplier will change.
Okay.
And then you'll see cheaper rates if the bid came back. And the only other thing to mention is where this process is now is, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Beacon is the local law, so they're moving beyond the non-binding into the local law process. I believe this November 28th, another public hearing. Town of Fishkill has the local law to officially join the CCA on December 7th. Phillipstown, I'm not quite sure, but
We're not on the schedule yet.
not on the schedule yet. But so the idea is to go ahead with the 20,000 accounts, hopefully Cold Spring, hopefully once, it's been all kind of behind closed doors at this point, but once kind of these municipal leaders announce this effort, to create the second CCA in New York, other municipalities join on. But I don't think at this point, and Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is to go forward. Jewel thinks that there's enough accounts currently interested in the CCA we've been working on to go forward with a bid in the next 6 months.
Yeah, so the key and the key in terms of the regulatory process, right? So as Jason is mentioning, getting the local law, setting a public hearing, getting the local law on the agenda, and approving it. First, that local law is just it's purely enabling and exploratory. It just says we can do this if we choose to. We are authorizing the municipality's home rule authority to do this. But what it does, so the important piece, lever that it pulls is that allows you to request the data from the utility that we would need to actually assess the viability of the bid for everybody. And then you start that exchange with suppliers to figure out whether or not it will in fact produce savings like we hope it will.
Can you send us, sort of the scheduling, what comes first, how much time in
Absolutely.
between?
Yes.
So we have an idea of which steps, we need to do and then what we need to think about.
And when is the non-binding resolution needed? I'm sure ASAP, but what time are you guys working on? Or
I mean, the non-binding resolution of support was a tool we used initially to sort of go from town A to town B and tell town
Right.
B, hey, we've been there and we're interested.
Right.
So it's not a critical step. I mean, if we're looking at sort of timeframes, the first request would be, if you're interested in doing this, would be the local law.
When does the public hearing come, before or after that?
before?
before.
Yeah,
So whatever your noticing rules are, notice the public hearing, hold the public hearing, and then close the public hearing and choose either to vote on the law that night or
Do
the
you
next.
present at the public hearing?
Certainly.
Okay, so you come up with the agenda, the materials, and we just sit there and watch.
And hopefully ask a lot of questions.
Ask good questions.
and we'll be providing you, I mean, you know, if you're interested, again, with that caveat, we'll be providing you the information, sort of the formal process outline, I guess, that's regulated by the Public Service Commission, so you can take some time to review that and see if it's something that you are interested in doing. You know, you
And if
certainly
other
hope so.
towns have, or municipalities have drafted the local law, I think that would be something good, the less
We have a draft that we're
Okay.
providing.
Yeah, we haven't
Oh,
talked about
Draft of
that.
the resolution and the local law.
Okay,
because that will save us
yes,
considerably.
yes.
In terms of convincing people that might be on the fence or whatever, like, what would be the only perceived downside of this for just Joe Average that lives in the village here, like, in your opinion?
The downside? I think that, one, it could be a kind of a gut, you know, someone mentioned, are we making a decision for all townspeople on their electricity supply? So we've gone to towns and there's kind of a gut kind of feeling against that. You know, we make the point that what's happening now when you don't choose is it just goes to default Con Ed. So that choice is already being made for you, but that is one downside. I think a second downside, you know, is what if you have a 3-year rate locked in, and as Glenn said, the rates drop for some reason in the energy market, and so it's very important to say, look, we are getting savings based on the past. It's not a prediction of the future, and if a month rate goes down, even though likely it's going to fluctuate like it always does, and by the end of the year you'll still be savings, if someone sees that month rate go down, they can switch out. But that is, you know, that is a risk. If someone says, look, I thought it was always going to be cheaper. On a month to month, it's kind of based about, you know, on the long run. And those are,
That needs to be the clear.
yeah,
That needs to be made
That's
very
right.
clear, yeah.
Does NYSERDA identify a CCA as one of their favored, or where do they do that?
The,
What do you mean,
Where can I find that?
we can send it to you, I'll send it to you tonight.
Okay, we have a NYSERDA grant, which is why I'm asking.
Excellent.
So it would be very useful to be able to say to them, hey,
Yeah, their Clean Energy Communities program lays out 10 high priority actions. CCA is one of them.
Great, great. The village has a couple of accounts, which are flat rate accounts. How is that calculated? When the village is looking at whether or not it wants to opt in,
right,
because the village will not be opted in,
right.
how do we evaluate our flat rate accounts from Central Hudson versus what the savings would be by going with a lower cost supplier?
Well, you
What
can
do they
certainly,
do? How do they do that?
how does,
How does the lower cost supplier evaluate that?
oh, so now I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, the village has a couple of flat rate accounts.
Right.
Where you've got, 10, 20 electric accounts.
Right.
Two of them, at least two of them, if not more, are flat rate accounts. We don't get, the bill is a flat rate bill. It's always the same. I don't know what goes into that. I don't know how Central Hudson calculated that to begin with. How do we evaluate that if we want to opt in?
Are they streetlights?
Pardon me?
Are the flat rate accounts, are they street lighting or something like that?
No,
or-
no, street
I-
lighting, no.
I think what you might be talking about is budget billing, in other words.
No, our siren, our siren, and we have flashing lights on. It's a static, use of
yeah.
electricity.
Yeah, it doesn't actually have a meter maybe.
If there's no meter,
Right.
it's flat.
Yeah,
How
so
does
they,
that happen?
yeah, they, the question of how they come up with that rate, your guess is as good as,
Okay.
it's a black box, but they really, it's supposed to be a reflection of their sort of cost of service to it and about how much power they expect you to be using. They have some data about how much those types of things use, you know, in a given month or when, and then they charge you based on that, but they're not actually metering it, so they don't know and you don't
The flashing
know.
lights are always flashing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like where are they? Okay.
Okay, so if you guys get us that information, then
We will.
we'll move.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, that was good.
Interesting.
We're taking up so much time. Thank you.
Next we have old business, just a couple things I'll just go over. It's not really old business, but there's some, some people, a little commotion on Christmas decorations. So we just received the contract from Central Hudson, and so Highway will be getting on that shortly. So if anyone's wondering why Christmas decorations aren't up yet, which I didn't know they were, but that's one thing. Fran, you have the leaf. You want to just make that announcement now?
Yeah, the last leaf pickup for the season will be on Thursday, December 1st. So all leaves in bags and any brush that needs to be tied should be put out the night before. And then after that, if there's any little bit left, it can go out with the regular garbage, but we assume that we'll have everything done by then because most of the leaves are down.
You didn't say tied, T-I-E-D, did you?
The bundles will be done.
Oh, the bundles.
Bundles will be
Gotcha.
tied. Yes, bundles of sticks cut certain lengths and.
When is the tree lighting ceremony?
I don't know. I don't know if they said that. Chambers,
Chamber
No,
or?
rec center.
Rec does, I haven't
I don't
heard.
know, I'm
Rec
asking.
is supposed to.
Don't know. I haven't heard anything from Rec in months.
They have a meeting in a month, so interesting.
One other thing I want to just touch on, and then we'll get into the other agenda, is the Fjord Trail. I'm part of the steering committee, so 2 weeks ago I was at the meeting with all the stakeholders, and we're going over the impact study, which they're just starting on, and met with the with AKRF, who's administering that, and I was there, Steve Smith, the chief of our fire department, and we went over our concerns, and they received a number of letters from Fair Street residents. So we did go over some of that and went through their whole process. Then last week, Trustee Early and I attended the meeting they had at Dutchess Manor, which was fairly well attended, and they didn't quite get through their presentation because they allowed a question, and and they were giving answers on that, and there were a lot of folks from the village that were concerned about pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic, what's going to happen. And then today I had a small meeting here. I asked the representatives from Scenic Hudson and Highland Trust and from State Parks to meet to go over what was discussed there and the concerns before they kind of moved forward to the next step, because they wanted to get more information out there. And but what I'd like to just emphasize is that what they're doing is an impact study, and a part of that is foot traffic, part of it is concerns by residents in different areas and what's happening, and the influx of tourism, and which just seems to keep growing and growing. So those are all brought up at the meeting, and we have our, I guess, our hands on the pulse of that, and I've represented to them or let them know, that what the concerns are, and like if you're talking about, well, Fair Street's a problem, let's redirect it to Dockside. Well, that's a problem for everyone on Lower Main Street, so we're just kind of moving the problem around. So we did a lot of discussing today on ways to, control pedestrian traffic. And one thing also I'd like to emphasize is that Scenic Hudson, or the Fjord Trail, is kind of inheriting all the problems that we have right now. So if they're not there, we're still going to have the problems. If they do come, maybe it'll bring more people, maybe it won't. I'm not sure how that'll work. But either way, I think we have a problem which we have to discuss, and I don't know what the answer to it is, of stopping trainloads of people coming and swarming down streets and pretty much destroying our environment. Or that's at least my take on it. I think that's part of their study, the Fjord Trail. Some of the controls, and there might be benefits to us, as far as funding or bathrooms or upkeep and trash, which would be part of the project. On the other hand, maybe there'll be more people, so maybe it's even worse. But regardless, well, I just wanted to say, to the public that we're on top of it. We understand the concerns. We've heard from, a number of people on Fair Street mostly, because that's the most impact. But, it's something that, we're on top of, and, the study will be, be moving along. They're gonna be having more public meetings, to address and get more input from the public. And the study will be available for anyone, and it's probably gonna take around a year. So, just wanted to say that we're kind of on top of that, and, and what was going on. I think there was some representation that we weren't even at the meetings, and just wanted people to know that we were and are very interested in what's going on in the village, and I've been to all these meetings and will continue to go there. So, just wanted to bring that up before we continued and before I have no energy and can't even speak, which is probably 5 minutes away. Next we have resolution 26-2016. We're amending Resolution 20-2014, compliance with open meetings laws, and basically it is just an addition of a few words. The way it was written at the time was that all committees in the village had to have agendas and minutes. And there was kind of no leeway at all in that. And if you understand kind of like what Mary and other of our boards and committees are up against number-wise and what the amount of work they have to do, that doesn't always happen. Some people, can use that against us. What we did was just add to the extent practicable to the resolution, so that, yes, we do want to have agendas, yes, we'd like to have minutes, but sometimes you have to understand that just doesn't happen in a small village. So I'd like to make a motion to amend resolution number 20-214.
Second?
Okay, it's a roll call vote.
Well, it needs to be seconded, and then you can
Second,
roll.
okay, sorry, so Marie seconds. Roll call, Trustee Miller,
Yes?
Trustee Early.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Belota.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Let's see, next we have resolution 27-2016, consenting to planning board acting as lead agency for SECRA review of 75 Main Street application. Matt, would you like to, it's pretty clear cut right there, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The only other involved agency would be the village board for parking waivers.
So I'll make a motion to consent to the planning board acting as lead agency, SECRA.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, I vote yes. Trustee Early?
I have a
Oh,
comment.
sorry, discussion.
I have a comment. Matt, you made the change to the resolution. There's the SECRA notice of intent to become lead agency, which is the third page. There, the description of the action says, allow a change of use from retail to food, beverage service in the existing building.
Second.
So that
We'll tighten it up.
that change needs to be made there as well.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, what we had thought we were amending to an approved site plan. We discovered that there actually wasn't one. So, and we're trying to kind of force these guys through to get them through because we're not meeting over Thanksgiving. So sorry, we actually missed that coordination. Thank you. We'll correct that.
So then we can move ahead with the resolution as amended?
Yes.
Okay,
Want to make that motion?
okay. So I make a motion that we approve resolution number 27-2016 as amended in the notice of intent to become lead agency in the description of action, to include the, to change it from, the quote, I'm quoting here, Sandy, of use from retail, end quote, to, of use from retail to TO, retail, comma, food/beverage service, dot, 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 dot.
And personal services.
And personal, in the existing building. The application also includes the approval of the existing personal service use, the next sentence.
Okay, I will second that motion. Roll call, I vote yes. Trustee Early?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Veloto?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is resolution 28-2016, to budget monies for Phase 1 Community Beautification Project. It's a transfer so that Jen Zwarek can get moving on some of the areas that during the project were left open for beautification and plantings. She has done a lot of work on that, and people were waiting to see if we were, for whatever reason, committing.
The thing is, resolution 28-2016 moves money from
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of moves.
from about 9 different accounts, including the beautification.
To
So-
adjust.
So the resolution is
Right.
for
I was reading
budget,
off, I was
budget
reading
amendment.
off the
Yeah,
agenda. Yeah.
it's for budget amendments,
Mhm.
including community beautification.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to move these, to move the budget lines.
Yes. A second?
This is also Trustee Early,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Miller,
Yes.
Trustee Veloto,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Consider a request for parking waiver for 2 Depot Square. Karen, you're here, and also Matt, if we have the request from the planning board. Matt, you want to speak to that at all, or?
Yeah, so it's, and the applicant's representative is here, Karen Parks. It's a request for a 2-minute site plan to change the units and add a retail unit, so it doesn't increase the residential. The planning board's concern, when we had reviewed all the supporting documentation of the legislative intent, the introduction of the concept by the mayor, as well as input from the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, was that it was for residential, for commercial use to allow changes of use applications to be approved, because otherwise there was no real mechanism to approve them. So the concern of the planning board members, the majority of the planning board members, was that, to approve the use of residential waivers for an expansion would be of great concern and in our opinion, an unintended consequence of the legislation. Specifically in comments from the standing boards, it was that, that it should have included language like, for existing structures or in their existing configurations, right? It should, and that, and commercial as well, because it's short-term, short-trip parking, right? And there's the parking obviously on Main Street is only 4-hour parking. Depot Square itself is even less at 2 hours. So the planning board, working with the applicant who was flexible in working with us, is not increasing the residential, the count, so there is no increased demand by the residential on Main Street, which is obviously long-term parking. So the planning board felt it was comfortable moving forward and recommending those residential waivers to, in fact, do what we believe the legislative intent is, which is to bring existing properties up to code without increasing the demand. Then there's the addition of the retail, which we think is very clearly supported by the legislation to support the change of use on applications on Main Street. So those are separate and apart from the residential, and that's why it's clearly delineated in the letter. So I think it kind of helps further document what often happens. Obviously, as we go to draft code, is that not everything makes it into the code. Code is brief, and I think that in this case it's unfortunate. I think this helps that because we kind of document what our position is, assuming the board agrees. This obviously was all run through the village attorney, who was also in agreement. So I think it kind of clarifies the village's position of what those waivers are. The concern would be if new construction, right, if you were to give residential waivers and then where those cars would go. This also dovetails with the residential parking permits that are coming, which there aren't any going to people on Main Street, right? So it's this big question mark as to where those cars would go, and that's obviously what the planning board wants to do, which is kind of plan and take an eye much further down the road, to figure out whether or not we're making things better or worse. And so I think that, I think this is, a good compromise, and I think it also then it further documents the intent of those parking waivers, which was really, when it was introduced and then when it was documented, although not entirely clearly, was to allow a mechanism for changes of use, which are a pretty good churn on Main Street, to be approved.
I have a question. Matt, in your letter to the board, you're asking for a waiver for 9 spaces. In Karen's letter to us, you're asking for a waiver for 10 spaces.
I think, John, you had said you did not want to use the third space, right?
Correct, so we were
In the garage.
a waiver for 10
Right. We can make that change. There was the planning board had asked and had communicated with the zoning board of appeals as well as the building inspector to say there's a tandem space that's actually trapped. And at the beginning of the application, there were 2 trapped spaces. So the planning board, in our role at a very high level, just says, hey, life safety, can you look at this? The building inspector came back with language that was a little soft. He said he's not aware of anything that would make it illegal. And so our question back to him was, are you talking about just Cold Spring Code? Because that's very clear, it's not in there, but on the broader New York State Uniform Fire and Building Code. And we kind of got the same answer back, that he's not aware of anything that would make it illegal. So Karen, on behalf of the applicant, I think wanted to take the more conservative approach to just not count it. So that way, in case there was any question that were to come up later, so that's correct. Long story short, I think the applicant wants to increase it by 1 on the residential side, which the board fully supports. That was the discussion. John drafted the letter differently. I wasn't sure why. I thought maybe he had communicated with Karen, but now that we're here together,
Right.
I guess he didn't. So that is correct.
10 spaces.
To increase it to, so it would be 6 for the retail and 4 for the residential. And they may or may not use that additional space, but Karen, I think, is wise in saying that, well, since there's this question out there of whether or not that space is safe, or there's any issue with it, where that to present itself, more concretely later, then she's not stuck with not enough parking.
Could you send
Sorry.
updated, no, just change the numbers in your letter.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that Karen's letter and your letter.
Yeah, I apologize.
Are
I
consistent.
thought maybe it was between the applicant and the village attorney, because I saw it change. I should have questioned it.
Anything else? I'll make a motion to grant the request for the parking waivers for 2 Depot Square.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Sorry for the coordination issues. We try to move people through quickly.
This is next is approved issuance of water shut-off letters. We do this every year, right? Yeah.
These are all in the village?
What's that?
These are all in the village, nobody in Nelsonville, right?
There might
Yeah,
be a
it's
few
definitely
in
Nelsonville also.
Yeah,
It is Nelsonville.
Yeah.
it's both. And I spoke to Mary today about it, and basically she says, some people just wait until they get the letter from us and then decide that they should stop paying. Some of these are multiple properties.
Yeah.
I'm okay with sending the letters, getting the letters sent
Yeah.
out. And then people just need to communicate back to us with their payment schedule.
I'll make a motion to approve issuance of water shut-off letters to these residents listed.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence, we have none. Bill approval, Village Goals from Board of Trust, or no, do we have the bill approval? Lynn, do you have it?
Yeah, I've got it right here. It's batch number 3835 for $184,000, $184,975.57.
Make a motion to approve the bill.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approval of minutes, Village of Goals from Board of Trustees, November 1st meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Village of Cold Spring, Village of Board of Trustees, monthly meeting 11/8/16. I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a question. It's a minor point. In the monthly report, the town of Phillipstown, it states the Stony Point parking lot, and I think Bob usually refers to it as the Washburn parking lot.
Yeah, what, I'm sorry, what was it?
It's just the way it's noted in the minutes as the Stony Point parking lot. I've never heard you call it that.
You guys call it the wash point.
And I gather it's the same place, but I just don't know.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So we'll change that to Washburn.
You wanna change it to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We,
This is the PC for Chris Wyatt.
I'm gonna do that now.
And
No, I don't want to do that.
So I do this.
What's
You
that?
okay with that?
But you can bring it up and definitely discuss and do that quickly, I think.
You ready?
Yeah, sure.
You said you
I know.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I sent this around late this afternoon, I don't know if everyone got a chance to look at it. I wanted to put through a proposal that the parking fees at the municipal lot on Fair Street be waived over the Thanksgiving holiday, so from 9 p.m. on Wednesday night until 8 a.m. on Monday, that the parking there would be free, and we could put a sign on the meter. And basically so people can enjoy the holidays, and then also so the Main Street merchants during small business shopping weekend would be able to have more people coming or without having to pay for parking, so if that's okay, I'd like to make that motion.
this is the small business weekend.
It is.
Okay, so it's not something that you would be recommending for Christmas weekend or New Year's weekend?
I wouldn't recommend it for a whole weekend, I might recommend it for the days, maybe Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, or something to that effect, but not throughout the whole, but I haven't gotten through that yet.
Well, it's, the reason I ask is that weekend, it's a shopping weekend,
Right.
we
And
make
I
money,
understand that, yeah. I understand that.
and I like to make money.
So, we know.
I will second the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I'm in favor.
I am in favor.
Aye. Marie?
I said okay. I think we're passing up a lot of money, so.
I know.
It's
for the
Thanksgiving.
And if we repeat it for Christmas and New Year's and Easter and July 4th and so on.
No, not July 4th. Okay, make a sign to put on the meter, sometime tomorrow evening that says that it's free parking.
Yeah, last time the executive session, that was
Is that through Sunday, Fran?
Through Monday morning, because it's free parking at night anyway,
Okay.
because of the winter. So it picks up again Monday morning.
Kathy's dollars, so
Right,
we're
Bill?
not gonna do it.
Okay.
The rest of them.
Well, I'll wait.
No, you're not gonna do anything else.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't- no.
All right. We're tabling number 8. We need to discuss with our attorneys a few things before we get into that. Public comment. Yes.
I just have one quick question. So are you guys assessing the last fee that you used? I think it's $2.50 per space for parking waivers?
Yeah,
That's what Karen suggested in her letter.
Oh.
that's what.
Well, that was based on what I'd seen
It's
other people
negotiable.
being
I
charged.
checked that it is a,
Yeah, no, I know, you guys have the right to set it or change it, so make sure you're just using the same one so she can write her check. Okay, great. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you.
Right.
It's almost the same question, or at least it's on the same topic on parking waivers. I know the code update committee is looking at changing the parking waiver system from a one-time use to a recurring annual use. And so I guess the first half of my question is, for businesses or locations that have these parking waivers that have been a one-time use, will that transition with a new code into a recurring use? Otherwise, I mean, and maybe not everybody here is aware of what the code update committee was working on, but then there was some public comment, and then some suggestions into, you know, just the complexity of, briefly, what kind of use and how much parking that's each different type of use is likely to draw. But that's the first half of the question. The other half of the question is, on residential versus other uses, not specifically to this address, but to just in general, are, because residential can be more than one thing. It can be long-term residential or it can be short-term. So there's apartments which are rented for 6 months or a year or longer. And then there's also apartments that are rented short-term, less than a day or less than a week or a day or something like that. Does the code look at any difference in interpreting?
The answer to the second
Parking.
is no,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not sure what the question was for number one. Can you restate it?
The first question was currently the parking
It's a one
waivers
shot-
are
it's
a
a one-shot
one-time
fee.
charge, which presumably, if once paid, has been paid and perhaps forgotten about. But if the village looks at a kind of desire for compensating revenues as a consequence, not as a one-time effect, but as long as the business or the residence is in existence and continuing year in and year out to draw parking requirements or parking demand. So if there's a transition there, how would that, have you thought about how that would work?
I think,
Right.
I think, are you asking if people that currently have parking waivers, including Two Depot, they're grandfathered in, or they get converted?
Would they get converted to a
I
year?
have no idea. I have no idea. Your second question, is there any your second question, I think, was, is there any differentiation in the code between a short-term residence versus a long-term residence?
Less than 30 days or more than 30 days?
I'm sorry?
At the 30-day limit, which is.
No, in terms of parking, no, none whatsoever. If the question is, might there be requirements for bed and breakfasts at some point in the future, it's a possibility.
That would be a different schedule, I think.
It would be a different set of requirements, right?
Anything else? One last thing, the meters are back on, you know, so I think you can call once again.
The water meters.
The water meters, sorry.
We posted both on Facebook and on the village website, the phone number and the website. You can make your appointment to get your water meter changed.
If you have received a notice that you should call in or go to the village website. If you haven't received such a notice, don't do it yet. The notices are being sent out in waves.
Well, I asked Greg and he said, yes.
No, I can tell you that I have not received a notice.
I have not either, and that's why I asked him.
No, it's,
Hold
I asked him the question last week, and he said it's being sent out in waves. And
Is
it's,
this mail?
pardon
Are
me?
you talking about mail?
Mailed, yes.
Okay,
Postcards, I think.
okay, because I got an email, so I wasn't sure.
You got an email?
You got the email blast from the village?
What was the?
Saying about calling the number, setting up the appointment, so I should wait for the letter.
I
Everyone is getting letters.
or postcards.
Okay, that's all.
Postcards or letters, I can't remember which. But I was under the impression that they were doing this in waves. You're saying he said today no? Because I haven't gotten a letter, I haven't gotten a
No.
I
postcard.
hadn't either, and, I'll double check with him tomorrow.
And I haven't gotten an email.
Because
Oh, I didn't
we
get the
posted saying, originally we posted saying, if you had been notified, then, you can set up your appointment, but it gave no contact information as to where to call. And so when I asked him, I understood from him, and I could have misunderstood that, anybody can call in.
I'm gonna call Greg.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
On November 1st, the village news and announcement did send out an email launching or announcing the program, and this may be what you had received, saying that the vendor was going to start
about it.
issuing letters
In the
to
middle of the
residents.
end of the meeting, and just wanted to know how the
I got
hearing,
another
or how,
email today.
And I got
how
another one
people
today.
respond, or are they getting
And I
letters, or are
received
they?
To call the vendor, yeah.
Yeah,
What's
to
the
call the
process?
should we wait for the letter before we call?
Okay. 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 Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Right, okay, so they gotta wait for the flyers. But so you could go on regardless, you could go on Facebook or do you have to wait for?
Yeah, the whole conversation.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Okay,
The line in and then
okay.
the people hooked up to it, it was all nice and wonderful until it's not starting to break down.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, you're both right.
Boy, is he
They are,
diplomatic?
they are sending out the 29th, they're sending flyers out in sections, but if you go on Facebook, you can go and, you know, you can check out their site and you can arrange an appointment. So, it's either way. So, if you got something or have their number, you can call them and they will set up an appointment for you.
Was it determined you need a licensed plumber?
I don't know
That
how
was
he
all
said-
settled, I'm not sure how it worked. I think the arrangement that they had at first was not one where they have to have a licensed master plumber. And I'm not sure how they worked it the first time, since they were out of state, and whoever they were working with, they complicated, but that's all been straightened out. So, I imagine that they have to, so they did work something with somebody. Greg's not here, wait, I'll call.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.